So welcome back to another episode, and welcome to my top 10 Genesis games of all time. I've been in a very nostalgic mood thinking about the old Sega days, the Sega Genesis, known as the Mega Drive, in Japan and Europe. I love this machine. I've absolutely adored it my entire life, and I've adored a lot of games on it. And I want to come in here and do a top 10 list. And before I begin, I just want to say this is just my personal picks. There's no official top 10 list out there. These are games that I played. I finished all of these games and I love them. And that's why I want to come in and talk about them today. But before we begin that, there's a few honorable mentions. I have to mention the amazing Musha. It's a great overhead shooter game. And then another shooter game this game means a lot to me, Thunder Force 2. This game is great, and it's side view and overhead. And here's one of the very first Genesis games I ever got for Christmas, and that's why it means a lot to me. Fist of the North Star in Japan, Last Battle over here. I played the ever-loving crap out of it Christmas morning, and over the years I finished this game multiple times. I think it's really a lot of fun. Another game that really deserved to be in the top 10 list. It almost made it in. There's a few others that just kind of pushed it out a little bit. There can only be 10. That would be Strider. I would have to put Strider here as a very, very honorable mention. This honestly should be in the top 10 list for sure. So many great times playing this in the arcade, and then this conversion to the Genesis at that time, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. It was like, this is by Capcom, side view game, playing as Strider. Awesome stuff. Now we begin the top 10 list. And we're going to start with number 10 here. A very popular mascot. I put this guy on the list because he's so symbolic of Sega. The biggest mascot. A great game when it came out. Blast processing. Sonic the Hedgehog. The original. The classic. Where it all began. I remember Nintendo had Mario and Sega created Sonic. And it was incredible. I remember the first time seeing the game. The incredible speeds of Sonic racing around the levels and collecting rings, and them talking about blast processing, and Nintendo couldn't do this, and I'm like, wow, maybe Nintendo can't do this. And they had me really going with Sonic. And obviously Sonic has had so many games since, but this in my heart is where it began from. It's a true classic. I don't think I could say I have a top 10 Sega Genesis list without including Sonic. It would be an impossible shame. So that's why it is there. Now, I remember being a kid, going to my local 7-Eleven and seeing this brand new arcade game. It was shining, it was blowing up in front of me, and I couldn't believe it. And I was really into Conan the Barbarian. Loved the comics, loved the movies. This was right up my alley, and that is Golden Axe, the amazing medieval brawler. Awesome stuff from the medieval ages, where you play as a barbarian, an Amazon woman, or as a dwarf Viking. Very, very cool game. I love this, and I remember I got my Genesis and I was waiting for this to come out. I'm like, when's this coming out? When's this coming out? When's this coming out? And I saw all the advertisements in magazines. I'm like, is it out yet? Is it out yet? And it still wasn't out, and I was getting very, very frustrated. And I'm like, I just want to play this game. It finally was released, and every single friend of mine bought a copy, and we played the crap out of it. And it's a side view, action, beat 'em up style of game. You're fighting wave after wave of enemies, but you could ride creatures and you could use magic, and it was really a lot of fun. I highly recommend Golden Axe. It shows its age a little bit, but it's still a true classic. Number 8. We finally get into an RPG on this system, and this system had a few really amazing RPGs. This is one by Yu Suzuki, the guy who created Hang On and later in his life Shenmue. But in the middle of that, he created this really awesome little RPG called Sword of Vermillion. Yes, it was an overhead style game, but it also had like side view missions as well, and had action scenes like that were out of an arcade. It was a very unusual RPG. He was trying to combine so many different things into one. And I think it's a success. A lot of people can argue Sword of Vermillion and say, yeah, I don't really like it, or, it wasn't really for me. This was really for me. I spent so many hours in my friend Andrew's basement watching him play the game because he got it first. I got it years later. and I love it. I love the music, I love the world setting, the kind of 3D dungeons that were going on. I think it offered a lot. I think it was, for Yu Suzuki's first RPG, he did pretty good. Number 7, we have to get into the next RPG on my list. There had to be another RPG, right? It's here. This was the big one, the first really big one on the Genesis. And I remember reading about this for like a year before it came out. I was like, oh my God. Just like Golden Axe, I was like, is it out yet? Is it out yet? I was like that back then. I was like, is this game coming out? And I couldn't believe it was finally released. Was I going to own a copy? No. But my friend Andrew was, again. As I said, I've said it many times on this show's history. My friend Andrew back then, he seemed to get everything years before I did. It was crazy. So Andrew got Phantasy Star 2, a wonderful RPG, a sequel to our favorite RPG of all time back then. And did it live up to it? Yes, it really, really did. Gone were the animated backgrounds. Those were gone, unfortunately. But what was here was a massive, long, huge RPG that took you so many hours. There was so much grinding in it. It was ridiculously over the top, but we adored it. We really enjoyed this game, and I spent most of my early days over at Andrew's watching him play it, going, God damn, I'm so jealous. When am I gonna get this game? And I ended up he lent his copy to me, and I ended up getting this game years later. It came with a hint book back then because Sega thought that a lot of people back then wouldn't be able to understand an RPG in North America, so they included this hint book and had all the maps and showed you way too much. There's a lot of spoilers in here earlier on, but wonderful game, great music, great monsters. Spent a lot of time with that. High recommendation, Phantasy Star. Up next, number 6. I don't own a physical copy of this. I did, but I don't know, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's gone missing. And I cleaned out the games room quite a bit of time ago now, and I looked for it, and it's gone. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what happened to it, but it doesn't take away from it being my number 6 choice here. This is an amazing strategy RPG on the Genesis, Shining Force. Shining Force is there. I remember playing this game for the first time, and I couldn't believe the battle animation. The characters on the screen, I was like, wow, look at the animation and the music and the overhead graphics of moving your troops around. I thought this was incredible. I just want to mention another really great strategy game that is not in the top 10 list. Should have got an honorable mention. Warsong, which is Langrisser. That's another great game. But Shining Force is amazing, and they released a few more of them, and I really enjoyed those. And then the Shining Force series now has become something different, and I'm a little hurt in the respect that I really wish it could go back to that strategy RPG series back then. It was unbelievable. The character designs, the monster designs, top notch. Now, this is kind of a hidden game. Not a lot of people know about this game on the Genesis, and rightfully so. I don't think this got a huge print run. It didn't get heavy advertisements, and it's an action RPG like Zelda, but it's on the Genesis. The Crusader of Sin. This little game here, and I got this at a Blockbuster Video, and it's worth a lot of money now. It's crazy. And I picked this up just because I wanted to play it. I got it for, I think, around 25 bucks back in the day. I don't know how. It's worth hundreds now. But I played it, and I thought this was a really fun game. It makes my top 10 list because it was kind of an overhead action RPG. And I really was wanting that on the Genesis. And when I got it, I was like, okay, I'm satisfied. You know, I got Zelda on Nintendo. I got Newtopia on the TurboGrafx. I got Crusader of Sin on the Genesis. So I was a very happy camper. Big recommendation on that. Here we go. This, I honestly feel, should be in everybody's top 10 list, but that's just my opinion. Because, do you know why? Because I love the game so much. I just want everybody to adore it the same as I did back in the day. And that is for Streets of Rage 2. Oh my god. The first game was incredible. Kind of building on the success of games like Double Dragon, where Sega came in and said, we're going to do our own side-view beat-em-up game. And they launched with Streets of Rage. And I remember sitting in my friend Andrew's basement and playing it, and the graphics and the music, and that's the thing I gotta say here. The first game's music was amazing. We go into the second game, and it's it's even better, I think. And that's not taken away from the first game, because the first game's music is a 10 out of 10 to me. Music by Yuzo Koshiro, and wonderful music, great characters. Going into the second game, I just love the level designs, I love the characters, I love the movesets. This is a game that I've come back to over and over and over and over again. I think I played it with every girl I've ever gone out with. They came over, I'm like, we have to play Streets of Rage. We have to do that. And we haven't up to now, and I just absolutely love Streets of Rage 2. A huge classic, and I know they're continuing the franchise now. We'll have to see how that turns out, but for me, I always go back to the second one. Not taken away from the first one either. That's a great game as well. We're moving into the top 3. At number 3 here, this is a wonderful game, and it's a sequel to number 3. Number 3 is not in here. I don't mind number 3, but it was number 4 that really did it for me. You'll have to forgive my box, but I got it from like a Blockbuster Video, Mega Movies back in the day when I was like 22 years old, and that's Phantasy Star 4. What can I say about Phantasy Star 4? Phantasy Star 1, favorite RPG of all time. Love that game. Number 2 was excellent. That's why it's in the top 10 as well. Number 3 was a bit, kind of went its own direction, we'll say. And that's number 4, Strength. It brought everything you liked in those original games and combined them all and created the greatest finish to this game series in history. And I love that. It did it so well. It brought back the past, it brought it into this modern game, and combined all the things that you liked in Phantasy Star. The backgrounds were back. You had vehicles again. This game was awesome. The music was awesome. The characters were awesome. Perfection. Perfection. To me, a 10 out of 10 game. Phantasy Star 4. Great RPG. Really amazing storyline too. Great cinematics. I gotta get off it. I gotta get on to number 2. Number 2 is one of those games where I finished it so many times where I'm a bit of a master of it. I'm really good at the game. And I know somebody else who's really good at the game as well. So a certain Joe from GameSack. We have this game in common. And I know for Joe, he loves this game. It's up there for him. I'd say it's probably up there as one of his top Genesis games as well. It is for me. It's a Capcom game, originally an arcade game. It's a sequel game, but a perfection game. The level design, the playability. I've gone back to this game over and over. It always has a constant challenge, but if you learn the patterns of the game, you can always get through it. Ghouls and Ghosts. Ghouls and Ghosts. What an unbelievable game. This game is almost like a 12 out of 10 for me. It really is. For the playability, the amount of times I've gone back, as I say, the level design, the music, the gothic horror monster setting that they created in this game is second to none. Capcom didn't just create a game here. It created a lived-in world. One that was creepy and surreal, and you play as a Knight Arthur running through all of these levels. And the first time you play this game, you will die. You will die very fast, and you will be mad, but you'll keep coming back, and you're gonna keep on learning how to keep going through the levels, and then you're gonna beat the game the first time. Then you're gonna beat the game the second time to get the true ending. This game is a great game, but the nostalgia also takes me back to my friends down the street. I remember us all sitting there playing it over and over and over again. And I loved it. And I even remember reading about the Super Graphics was coming out in Japan and how that was getting an arcade perfect version of this, Ghouls and Ghosts. And I was like, oh my God. I was really excited, like, because Ghouls and Ghosts was such a wonderful game. And so big props to this. And I think you can still get this game at a reasonable price. Pick it up without a doubt. We are there. We're at number 1. We're at number 1. And I made a video about this a few years ago and said, this is my favorite Genesis game of all time, because I did some deep dive thinking on it. I really thought about it a lot. And it's one of those games, I got my Genesis for Christmas, and just after Christmas was my birthday, and my parents took me down to Bellis Fair, and I was able to pick a few games. I picked Alex Kidd and this game here. Revenge of Shinobi. Now, I love the original game in the arcades back in the day, and I was like, oh my god, there's Revenge of Shinobi? This is like a sequel? And so it's kind of one of those blind buys. I bought it in a Fred Meyer in the States that night, and I brought it home, and I didn't know what to expect because there was no internet back then. So I brought it home, and I'm like, am I gonna like this? Is it gonna be fun? I finished Alex Kidd in a couple of days, and I was mad. But Revenge of Shinobi took me a little bit longer. Oh my god, where do I start? Yuzo Koshiro, who created Streets of Rage music, which I was loving on the Genesis sound chip, back then. I was like, oh my god, that music's great. He did the music for this. The music is awesome in this game, but it's the platforming, it's the action-adventure of this game. It's memorizing the levels, going through it all, fighting the enemies, the boss encounters. There's so much to talk about in here. I could sit here for an hour and a half and do a deep dive into Revenge of Shinobi and talk about every reason why I like it. But I will say this, go and buy this game. Go and find it on the cheap, and you can find it on the cheap. There's a couple of versions of it though. There's a version, the original version that I have, where you can fight, Godzilla and Rambo and a lot of different characters like that they didn't mind, Spider-Man and Batman, where Sega got away with that back then, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my god, the companies kind of came after them, or they were worried and said, we better change this for licensing reasons, and so they changed all those characters, are no longer in the updated version of the later versions of the Genesis version. So if you have one of the early versions, that's a bit of a collector's item. That's the one that you want to have. That is the perfect version. So guys, I just wanted to come in and talk about the Genesis today, and I love doing these episodes because not only do I get to talk about my top 10 games, but I get to kind of revisit them in my mind and all the fun times I had back in the good old Genesis days, the days of my youth, the days when I was like 15 years old playing all of these games. And oh my god, a small tear here for that younger John. And it's all these years later now, and I still love these games to death. So anyways, guys, until next time.